Good morning and welcome to this great Tuesday morning, number something and something of lockdown, and to session 2 of our series on conscious living. In today's series, in today's session rather, we're going to concentrate on automaticity, which is a fancy word for automatic negative thought systems, which is a fancy word for autopilot, for being on autopilot. Hi, Sean. Welcome. Thanks for joining. So I want to welcome all the viewers, any new viewers that are out there. I think there's quite a few new people that are following this page. I want to say thank you. What I did realize was that I often refer back to previous sessions in my talks, and I'll say I covered this in more detail in a previous session. So if you'd like to view those sessions, they're all archived on my page, Greg Smith, counseling psychologist and executive coach. You can find them under the video section. There's probably at least 30 videos there, 20 to 30 minute videos that are all archived there, and you're welcome to watch them. They're all labeled, so you can follow them in order and catch up with all the work we've been doing. So so let's head into today's session, which is on automaticity. Like I said, so it's a fancy word for being on autopilot. And what we're going to do today, we're going to look at the relationship between being mindful or becoming more conscious and this automaticity. We're going to look at how important our experiences are, because most experiences involve automatic patterns or behaviors. And the problem with this is because they become habitual, we don't really know that they're going on. So until we become aware, we'll never be able to change those habits. So mindfulness or conscious living helps us to become more aware of these habitual patterns that have crept into our lives. And just on an aside, all behavior is learned. Whether it's through your society, through your culture, through your parenting, through whatever, all behavior is learned. So because behavior is learned, it can be unlearned. And it's the same with our brains. We can also unlearn these habitual patterns of thinking. Hardy-dars. Excuse the hardy-dars. So let's have a look at some of the theoretical background of automaticity. So as I've mentioned already, automaticity equals autopilot. And autopilot is simply, there's no one driving the airplane. The pilot can go and get a cup of coffee, he can go and have a snooze, he can go and chat to the people in the cabin, but no one's driving the ship. So this whole series and everything about my talks has always been about waking people up, helping you to become more conscious, helping you to find your centers. Then as well, automatic thinking or automatic behavior or automaticity is extremely positive. Why? Because it allows for parallel processing. What is this parallel processing? Well, while you're driving your car, you could be talking to people in the car, you could be checking the mirror. You don't have to think about changing the gears. You don't have to think about pushing the clutch in when you change gears. It happens naturally. So we are able to do different things at the same time. So multitasking, so to speak. I was going to give an anecdote, but maybe I should. I was driving on the freeway the other day, and I saw this taxi in front of me, and I was wondering why the guy was riding so slowly, and he was leaning on his steering wheel. And I thought he was on his phone. I'm thinking, he's on his cell phone. And as I overtook him on the left-hand side, which in South Africa is we drive on the left, but he was in the right-hand lane for supposedly fast cars. There he was counting his money in his hand while he was driving. So this is an example of parallel processing, that he was able to drive. It's certainly not safe, but while he was driving, he was able to count the money in his hand at the same time as driving. So automaticity is good because it allows us to do this parallel processing. Morning, Faye. The negatives are that it creates extreme amounts of impulsivity, reactivity, and your mind's going to make up stories. We'll do an exercise a little bit later on in today's session where it's going to show you how we make these assumptions. So there's a lot of negativity around it. Also the loss of self-control. We might be so used to just shouting out whatever we're thinking that we blurt out something and then we quite feel a lot of guilt afterwards. And of course, your objectivity decreases. We think we're being objective, but because it's in our mind and we haven't managed to question it, these automatic negative thought systems, and a great acronym for them is ANTS. So these ants in our heads can create a lot of problems for us. And after a while, this subjectivity, not objectivity, the subjectivity of our thinking patterns and this habitual way of thinking can create a lot of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, etc., as we try and run away from it. So it's extremely important to identify these patterns, to realize they're going to happen, or they are happening. It's not a case of them not happening. They're definitely happening in each of us. We each have these habitual thinking patterns. And there will never be change because it's habitual development. So we have to become more mindful so we can start listening to these things. And this is why a lot of the sessions have spoken about finding time to stop and think, check in with your thoughts, check in with your feelings, check in with your body, what's going on. And when we do that, it makes way for choice, and it creates a little bit of psychological distance so that we're able to not necessarily challenge our thinking, but change our relationships with our thoughts and our feelings. So I want you, here's the first exercise in today's session, but I want you to imagine strolling along a street that you're well acquainted with. As you look up, you notice that someone is there on the other side of the road, someone that you know, and you smile, you look at them, and you wave at them, but the person doesn't respond to you, and the person just continues to walk on without giving you the slightest reaction. So you give a wave and then sort of give it one of those and go, well, what just happened there? So I want you to think about what goes through your mind when that happens. You've seen someone on the street that you know, they were looking at you, you waved, and they don't wave back and carry on walking. How do you respond to this situation? What's your automatic response? I don't want to know what the clever response is, like, oh, no, he was obviously thinking, didn't see me. That's great. That may be afterwards, but what's your first thought when that happens? And maybe just before we go on to the questions or this idea, we've touched on this in another series as well, where we spoke about, let's use this in another system and probably more contemporary. You text someone, you WhatsApp someone, you see the two blue ticks, you see it land on their phone, you see the two blue ticks, they've read it, and it was someone important, maybe someone you love, maybe your partner, your husband, your wife, a close friend, and they don't get back to you. What is the first thing that goes through your mind? Okay. What thoughts did you notice? What emotions arise? What body sensations? Did you get flushed? Did you get angry? Is there a link between what you thought, what you felt, and how your body responded? And were there thoughts that created certain feelings and body sensations? And the answer is yes. There's loads of emotions that go through. Automatically, we normally assume the worst. What did I do wrong? Is the person cross with me? Is something going on that I should know about? Are they trying to avoid me? So all these thoughts, our brain these are ants, the automatic negative thought systems that go on inside our heads as we constantly do this. Like I mentioned before, I had a lady once who was working in a shopping center, and she was the head of security, and she was processing someone who had been arrested for shoplifting, and her boyfriend kept on texting her, and they came to see me because every time he texted her and could see that she had read it, he thought she was having an affair, and she was busy processing someone who had been arrested. So this instant automatic thinking creates a lot of problems in relationships. And we need to understand that these thoughts automatically emerge. And your brain's going to go make gaps, and it's going to try and fill the gaps. So they often emerge immediately and automatically and spontaneously. And your mind makes up stories. As the stories might be true, okay? I'm not going to say they're not true, but most often they are not true. It's going to be an assumption. You've created the story. Then I want to quickly read you a story about, I'm not going to read about John and Jill. I'm going to read you a story about Jill. And I want you to think about how your mind makes up stories as I read through the story. Jill has to go to school. Her mother asks her to get out of bed. Jill replies that she'll be there in a minute. After 5 minutes, her mother asks her again to get out of bed. Jill replies, I'll be there any minute, Mom. When her mother angrily shouts that Jill should really get out of bed now, she replies that her mother shouldn't treat her like a little child. Her mother replies that it's inappropriate for the head of a school to show up late for school. So I'm wondering how many times your mind had to keep correcting as you were making these stories up about Jill. First, you thought Jill was a little girl. You maybe identified with the mother, constantly trying to get your kids out of bed in the morning. You didn't realize that Jill was arguably 56 years old, or somewhere in her mid-50s, and the principal of a school, living with her mom. She might have been a widow. She could have been a single lady. But yeah, your mind has to keep making up stories as you're going along. Now, when we're listening to someone talk to us, our brain is quickly jumping and going, oh, that's what they're trying to say. That's what I think they're going to say. This is why I must say. So our brain, instead of just listening, and we've done sessions before on active listening and letting the person finish, we are constantly adding things in. Hi, Madeleine. Hi, Sadrul. I see 2 people have joined there. Thanks for joining. So we keep adding in to the gaps. So when we did this exercise about Jill, what did you notice about your thoughts again? In what ways did your mind automatically assume things that created its own version? Have you noticed the same things going on in your life? If so, how did your own mind automatically react to something? So the goal of this exercise is just to realize how your mind creates its own stories. And what we think can be very, very, very different to what's actually happening. Hi, Rain. Morning. Thanks for joining. Okay. So in today's presentation, we're going to talk about what is automaticity. We're going to look at automatic behavior, and we're going to look at automatic cycles. So this thing called automaticity or automatism, it's something we do that we're not even aware of. Okay, most of our behaviors are automatic. Driving, eating, playing piano, guitar, gestures that we make, and it's all built through repetition. So we do these things over and over and over again through our lives, and we don't even realize we're doing them in the end. I mean, I'm sure that those of you that are married or have partners, there might be some irritating little things that your partners do without even realizing it. I think this my young boy, when the floss came out, it became so automatic that whenever he stood still, he would do this dance move called the floss. And I said, I don't even think you realize you're doing it. The minute you stand still, you start doing this floss. And it was quite funny, but we don't realize this is happening. Now, as I mentioned before, there are wonderful benefits for automaticity. It allows for fast and parallel processing becomes possible. We can do these mental shortcuts. We don't have to, it's like they call it muscle memory, like in golf. You don't have to think, grab the club like this, I must swing back. You automatically just do it. So this becomes automatic. They call it muscle memory. And then we can multitask. And then little attention is needed for automatic actions. But the disadvantages are that they become habitual. And we first create these habits. Like I said, behaviors is learned. So we first create these habits. Let's say having a beer with every time we braai or barbecue, or having a beer every time we watch soccer or football or rugby. But afterwards, we then cannot have a braai without having a beer, or we can't watch rugby without having a beer. So our habits afterwards start dominating us. So the disadvantage of this is that it's often difficult to change, and it's unconscious, and we're therefore not in the moment. The minute it's unconscious, we are in another place and not in the present space. So smoking would be another great example. We smoke habitually. We don't even realize we're smoking. I used to be a smoker a long time ago, almost 30 years ago now. But we don't even realize we're smoking. So we're totally unconscious. And the minute you become conscious, it's a lot easier to control your smoking. So some of our automatic patterns cause problems. Like I've just mentioned about drinking beer if you're barbecuing or braaiing. And I'm using barbecue because there's some foreign nationals that are watching. Automatic negative thinking every time a certain situation occurs. Oh, this person's coming in the room. Another client of mine once mentioned the other day that the minute someone walks into their room, their partner, then they get a certain feeling. So we have this automatic feeling when this person's around. Now that might not mean an argument's about to break out just because that person's there. And then obviously automatically letting emotions guide our behavior. Hi, Emil. Thanks for joining us. I think, like I mentioned, there's quite a few people that have joined from India, so welcome. Then automatic behavior. Obviously, we become extremely reactive. I mentioned that what we're trying to do with conscious living is to try and reduce impulsivity and reactivity. So a situation occurs, you have this automatic thinking, and then you automatically have a reaction. So someone gives you a snide remark or says something sarcastic to you, you automatically respond in a certain way and start shouting back at that person. If the situation, for example, elicits a sad feeling, you would then automatically feel, I don't like this, and you would start feeling more sad, and your reaction would be to cry. So the question is, how do we change? How do we start changing these automatic behaviors? How do we become more conscious? And the only way to do this is by increasing attention. And how do we increase attention? And I'm going to be telling you in today's session. So mindfulness is a really great way to help you to start becoming more conscious, to start waking up, and at least sort of to press the pause button a little bit. So now the situation happens. We have mindful attention because I'm present, and then we're going to have a reaction. Like I've just mentioned, so it's a bit like pressing a pause button between stimulus and response, between the situation and our reaction to that situation. So now, when something happens, we can ask, what's going on? How do I feel? How should I respond? What am I going to do about it? Okay. So now we receive a snide remark. We don't just lash back at that person. I've even been noticing on my taper and on my Facebook page, there's been a lot of debate around some of the stuff around COVID, and someone made a comment and labeled me a certain label. And I didn't respond to the label, but quite a few friends on Facebook responded in my defense to that label. But when you receive a snide remark, you could notice, am I getting angry, or I am getting angry, or am I can feel tension. I feel like I want to hurt the other person. Now I can decide, should I shout at them? Should I stay calm? Should I hurt them, or should I just walk away? So you're a lot more able to control your behavior with mindful attention or with hitting the pause button. Okay, so mindfulness gives you conscious choice. And as I mentioned to someone in a mindfulness session, they wanted to know, well, can I still punch the criminal if I catch him? And the answer is yes, if you want to. It might not be the right reaction, but now you will consciously do so rather than unconsciously do so. Then we get caught up in these automatic cycles. So you feel something, then you will think a certain way. And if you think a certain way, you're going to feel a certain way. So this catches you into the cycle of thinking and feeling, thinking and feeling. So the situation occurs, you feel a certain way, so you think a certain way, that causes you to feel a certain way. And I'm going to give you an example now. Getting caught in a traffic jam, especially those that have a bit of panic and agoraphobia, now they start feeling frustrated in the traffic jam. They start saying, I hate this. Because they hate this, they feel more frustrated. And this just creates a bigger and bigger cycle. You might have done an exam and done poorly in the exam. Then you get frustrated with the result. You start feeling guilty, start thinking, why didn't I work harder? More guilt happens. You don't want to feel this way. You start feeling more frustrated, and the cycle just perpetuates. And as we've mentioned with the quicksand metaphor, it sucks you down into extreme panic or extreme anxiety around the situation. So we've got to realize we get captured in the cycle, and the more we try not to feel about it or not to think about it, we become more captured than before. Again, I'm referring to a previous session. We spoke about polar bears, not thinking of polar bears. So the more you try not to think of polar bears, the more you're going to think of polar bears. So this cycle then will determine our feelings and how we move into our future with this panic and disorder going around this, as I said, like a quicksand sucking us down. So how do we leave that cycle? So one of the ways we spoke about yesterday is we can connect to the present moment using an anchor. We spoke a bit about using your breath. We can allow those feelings to be present. We're going to talk about acceptance in about 2 or 3 sessions time. And we can notice when that kind of debilitating thinking starting to take over again, and we can come back to our anchor. So we notice the thinking, we notice the feelings. We take a breath, a conscious breath. We just start checking in with our breathing, because our breathing puts us back into our bodies. We can also, I've often mentioned to people, I'm just jumping out into anxiety or panic attacks. If you're in a shopping mall and you start feeling anxious or you start feeling a panic attack coming on, many people will just run outside, which is also an automatic response to this feeling of panic attack. But if you simply allow yourself to start noticing circular objects or blue objects or square objects, this helps you to check in with your senses rather than sitting up with your brain, which is now creating this automatic cycle. Right, so just to remember, the situation occurs, then we have this cycle, this self-replicating cycle of emotion, thoughts, and then obviously the behavior. But mindful awareness helps you to sort of just pull back a little bit from this automatic way of thinking. So that's our chat for today. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to say, please, if you have enjoyed the video, share it with anyone else. If you do enjoy the other videos that you've seen on my page, or you've been following me for a while, please visit my page and please have a look. If you just scroll down, there's a section where you can recommend. I'd love you to recommend it if you're enjoying what you're having. It just says there, it's a simple process. Would you like to recommend Greg? Yes or no? And then if you said yes, then it gives you a little section where you can write something. So if you've had any experience with me, if you've attended any of my groups or had any individual coaching, I'd really appreciate a recommendation. Word of mouth goes a long way in getting my name out there. So thank you. Have a lovely Tuesday, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're going to check in. We'll be doing judgment tomorrow, which is a great session. So see you then. Take care. Have a lovely day.